at another awesome interview, and I'm here with director Justin Lee about his new film "Alone We Fight." This is a World War II drama, correct? Yes, I had the opportunity of screening it the other day. Loved it. So, can you talk a bit about this battle of Hudberg Force? Hurtgen Force. My apologies. What is it about this specific event that you made you want to focus on for your movie?
No one's talked about it. It's one of those battles that's completely overshadowed by the Battle of the Bulge, because the Battle of the Bulge was the last big German offensive, which happened right there at the tail end of December in '44. But for 3 months prior to that, you had roughly 50,000 to 40,000 American soldiers fighting in this 50 square mile forest, and they were getting decimated. We lost two full divisions, 20th, 29th infantry divisions, roughly about 33,000 Americans, about 20,000 civilians. And it's the most casualties in the war in one particular kind of battle. And no one talks about it. The HBO made a movie back in '97 called When Trumpets Fade.
That's right.
That's the only other thing that's ever been really made on Hurtgen. So that's why I kind of wanted to tell some kind of a tale within that forest, because it's a really important moment in the war that no one talks about. And if we don't, I said this last night at the premiere, if no one makes these movies, even if they're intimate small stories, they're gonna get lost in history, and no one's gonna know about them. You know.
Okay. You mentioned a good point there. Can you talk about the process about coming up with this tale within this story?
Yeah, so we obviously had a very limited budget, and making a period piece on hardly any money is hard enough as it is. Making a World War II movie where you got to have all this stuff is crazy as well. And I have seen every independent World War II movie that's been done. Most of them have they're all VFX. The muzzle flashes, everything. And I said going into it, I was like, guys, this has to be authentic. This has to be blank ammo. We have to have explosions. Like, everything has to be real. And so when we went into it, I said, if we're going to do all that, we're going to have to tell an intimate story. And so it was really about two friends. And I said, okay, that's a good avenue. And especially with Hurtgen, because there's sections in the line on where the line was, that there was only like 20 people manning one line. There'd be aid stations, but there'd only be like 20 soldiers. And half the time you didn't know where the line was. So it made sense to be able to tell a very small story in such a big battle, because that's really how it was. And so it was the kind of the perfect setting for it. And that allowed us to also just focus on that small group of Rangers, and then just bring in all the blank ammo and explosions we could do to make it really authentic, with the grenades and gunfire and everything like that, and the vehicles. Yeah. That was kind of the process. I mean, that's how we kind of came up with the story I came up with the story with the Rangers, which were also there. I mean, their claim to fame. They're the thing that the Rangers are most proud of is the taking of Hill 400, which happened. If you were to look at where our story takes place, about a week later is where that occurred, where they took Hill 400 in the Hurtgen Forest, which is a really big achievement. And so yeah, so it had to be an intimate story and very small, and this was the best way to tell it. It was just about two guys and their friendship and whatnot.
Now, I want to flesh out more of that friendship part, but let me ask you about authenticity, because I screened the film and was so impressed. Like you said, you got the weapons and the uniforms. They look like very somebody. I mean, from that period. Can you talk a bit about how challenging was it to acquire some of those things for the film?
We had a lot of reenactors work on the movie, so they brought a lot of stuff. I had spent a lot of time. I'm a big history buff myself, so I kind of knew everything that the Rangers needed in their outfits, and we actually went and found all of it here in Los Angeles. All right. at all the old surplus stores and stuff, and we found all the Ranger coats. We found the boots, and stuff's expensive, right? But it had to be authentic. Yeah. So we found our main Rangers uniforms, and that was all real. Our reenactor guys came in to play guys in the First Army and Infantry and 28th, 29th divisions, and they had basic uniforms that they had for reenactments and stuff like that. Weaponry was a little tricky. Like, we had, a lot of these guys, these reenactors, have the M1 Garands. Finding Thompsons and finding things like that gets a little harder. And so we were really scouring for 2 weeks before production to really find some of those things. And we had one of the guys that came out, who was kind of one of our big prop masters, Anthony Bowman. lives in Eastern Oregon, and he has one of the largest collections of private military vehicles and weaponry in the U.S. And he brought out the ambulance, and he brought out the MG42, the MG42 scene when they fired the MG42 on our Rangers. That was a real MG42 captured in North Africa. It's got the stamp on it. I mean, it's pretty amazing. All those MP40s that are all automatic gunfire. He brought a lot of that. I mean, he brought 80% of that stuff. And I knew a guy up there who had a Stuart tank, which was in Hurtgen. So I called him up and I said, hey, can we bring the tank out for a couple days? Another guy donated his Jeep. And then some of the other reenactors had all the aid tents and stuff, and we just kind of put it together. And the great thing was that, again, in this battle, things were so raggedy and destroyed because everything played perfectly with. We didn't have to do much. We didn't have to distress much, especially with reenactors. They have everything ready to go, right? And that's how we put it together. I mean, that's how we put a lot of the production value together. And I did it. I also did it on when we made Any Bullet Will Do. The opening of Any Bullet Will Do was the same reenactors. They all these guys that worked in A Lonely Fight also do Civil War reenactment. So the openings of Any Bullet was all the same guys, and so it's pretty cool to be able to utilize those guys because otherwise they go play out on a field and they do whatever. But then to be part of a movie and get to do it, they had a blast, and the movie couldn't have been as good as it was without them. I mean, they really made the authenticity of it. So.
See, and it pays off, and that's what I love about. That's what I love about independent filmmaking. You guys, go extra and to make it look fascinating. Now, when it comes to World War II movies, of course, the battle scenes part, battle scenes are probably the most anticipated parts of the movie. People will look forward to it. But I notice in your film, it's so dialogue driven. The gem lies in the conversation between the characters. Can you talk a bit about, maybe in your process of scripting it, why did you focus on that?
I thought it was extremely important for people to understand how close soldiers were back then, especially when you've been going through that many battles each and every day. You want to be more detached, but you get closer and closer, right? My grandpa's been a big part of my life. Was in World War II. He was a captain of a Black Cat for the Black Cat Squadron in the South Pacific, and his crew were his brothers on that plane. And so, that's one of the big things when you read Band of Brothers and you read everything, and they all were. And so it's extremely important, I think, in any war movie to actually show how close those guys are. And it might not be a whole unit. It might only be a couple guys in that unit, but they all were like that. No one was, you were fighting alongside your brothers, and, you were trying to get out of their life together. So it was really important to show the relationship between Boston and Falcone, between Boston and Greg. And yeah, you had to have that. You also had to have that to care about. You have to have that to care about characters. That's character development, right? I mean, you gotta see their different journeys in life, and clearly they're two different people that come from kind of two different walks of life with their ideologies and whatnot. And so yeah, it was extremely important. Dialogue was extremely important in this film, especially when you had downtime. You had these little skirmishes, and then you had all this downtime. And it's like, well, what did soldiers do in that downtime? They're reloading ammo all the time, or they're trying to find hot chow, or they're just trying to find a cup of warm, hot coffee, right? And so I think it's important to play all that out, and then of course showing. We get to our climax. Obviously, our climax is 30 something minutes of straight action from the minute it starts going through, and but all of that dialogue leading up to that, I think, is important. So you actually care about those characters when they really start to go through it. So.
Now, fantastic cast, Aiden, Johnny, right? And of course, LA Law legend, Corbin. Can you talk a bit about putting this band together?
Yeah, so I'd known Aiden for a little while. We always wanted to work together, and another friend uses him in a lot of stuff, and he's just great. And he's done a lot of stuff. He was just on American Horror Story. And he's just a really good actor. And it was kind of like, yo, man, we got to work on something together. And this is what it was. And he dove into this character. I mean, it was pretty outstanding. And then Matt got the role because one of the guys who was supposed to actually play that character dropped out. And Matt jumped in 2-3 weeks prior to the film starting and just owned that role. And I had to change some things a little bit because Matthew James McCarthy, who plays Boston, is from Boston. And I said, listen, let's shift some things up. And he was just natural. But getting to act with Aiden, you kind of when you work with just really good actors, you watch everyone kind of try to meet each other. You know what I mean? And it's a beautiful thing. It really is. Um, and I've known Matt for a while. I mean, he's a really good friend, so he came in and they were great. Corbin, I worked with Corbin. He's in another movie coming out of mine. He plays a grandfather in a movie called Swell that comes out in April, I believe, or March or April. And we worked on that before this movie. And he had said after that, he's like, dude, we got to find something else to work on together. And so we hadn't casted the Colonel. The Colonel was one of the last things shot. And we were kind of into shooting, still looking for people. And I said, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, how come I haven't called Corbin? I called Corbin, and Corbin's like, when am I flying out? He read the Colonel scene. He's like, when am I flying out? And he showed up and just was kind of in awe at all the tents, and we had everything. Everything was, he walked in, and we had the actual plans from Hurtgen Forest out on desks, and there was radio equipment. And for an actor, especially a seasoned actor like Corbin, to come in and have all these things to play with and just be already in that, you're not on a set, you're on a stage, you're actually out in a tent on location. He was just like, all of a sudden just became that Colonel, right? Yeah. And he's just such an awesome guy, and it's really great to work with him. I mean, and he's a legend. The guy's a legend, so,
I've interviewed Corbin for Psych at one point, and he's just the coolest guy on earth. So, did they have to go through any sort of soldier boot camp?
Yeah. So Aiden and Matt actually, some of the coordinators we had and the prop masters and stuff. Again, Anthony was a Ranger. He led one tank crews into Desert Storm, and then went back when we went into Iraq and Afghanistan and led the Rangers. So he knows all about the history of the Rangers, and he put them for several days through formations. And you'll see it at one point when they're yelling set running, going from tree to tree, and that's how the Rangers would move. You jam, you're yelling jam out, you're reloading, so to stay still. So they went through all that. They learned how to fire those guns like you would. Your rifle or your Thompson was your lifeline. Like you didn't want to get it dirty, you didn't want it to jam. And Aiden's did. Aiden, no matter how hard he tried to keep that Thompson out of everything, and that Garand, the M1 Garands, they'll fire every time. Thompson, jam. So he was cut down to, he had just from trying to rack rounds out to unjam it. He had a terrible time with that Thompson. But yeah, they went through several days of doing that stuff. They learned how to dig foxholes. They learned how to all that to cover, to flank, which is, you'll see them do that a lot. The sniper scene, they learned how you got to spread a line with a sniper, so that a sniper can't really focus on one position, or he'll have to move, right? Yeah. And so it was all real military tactical stuff for that time frame,
That was amazing.
Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah.
Now, so how many days of shooting is this?
18. We did 18 days.
That's
18 days shooting.
Yeah.
It was. We were really cranking. And fights take a long time. You really gotta. We shot it in a very unique way. My DP, Justin Janowitz, I love the guy. We decided going into it, we wanted to shoot the film different than other war movies, where everything else is very kind of a lot of sticks or just a lot of big dolly shots in war films. And we said we want to put this thing on a gimbal, and 90% of this movie on a gimbal, and that's what we did. We put it on a DJI Ronin gimbal and flew that thing around every scene through all the fights and everything. And it definitely, when I watch it, when we went to the premiere last night, it isn't like any other war movie. I just watched Fury again here a week ago, and things are just so steady, or they're frenetic, shaky, like Saving Private Ryan. Yeah. And ours has a big fluid movement going through everything, so it's different, and I like that. We kind of put our own stamp on it, and that's all Justin Janowitz, the DP. And we even created. We had our gimbal, but we created a larger gimbal out of pipe and whatnot to kind of have two people run with it through the explosion scenes when they're running and all the grenades are going off with them, so that we could get these big long tracking shots but still be on a gimbal. And it was awesome. I think Justin did just a phenomenal job shooting the film.
I agree. That is one of the highlights that I noticed watching the film. Like you said, the fluid movement of the camera, the tracking shot, is fantastic. The cinematography is excellent in this film. So as I'm winding down to my final questions, I gotta ask, for my fans who are aspiring filmmakers, having gone through this experience, what would you say to them if they want to make a war movie as well? What do they have to look out for and stuff like that?
I'd say if you're trying to make a war movie, um, I can't prop up using reenactors enough, but also they just know they know what the blanks are, where to get the blanks. They know all the safety precautions. Even though you're gonna have an armor, they also know. It's kind of like you have your armor, but then you've got like 20 other armor. You know what I mean? You've got, or like, oh, we have our wardrobe person, but then you've got 20 other wardrobe people. Like, it's kind of like in that realm of war, you've got a multitude of other people that know exactly how to unjam the gun. Oh, we need to strip a gun down and clean it. So reenactors are just a huge thing to be able to use, and they just want to come have fun and they want to work on something. Yeah. But that's where all your production value can really come from is from reenactors. Um, Research, you want to make a war movie, do these guys honor and do as much research and as much authenticity as you can make it. Clearly, there's some stuff you're just not gonna be able to do, right? You can't use real ammo. You're gonna use blank crimp blanks. There's just stuff. You got to have a blank adapter on each gun. A lot of veterans point that out. That handle those. Normal people don't know what they're even looking at. They just think they're looking at a real gun, but to those guys, they might see that little extra piece of metal and be like, "That's a blank adapter," because they carried that gun for years on end. You know what I mean? Authenticity is huge. Research whatever your story is, um, even if it's a made-up story during that time frame. Then make sure though those costumes are right. Just that's the hardest thing about anything period pieces is you got to do it the right way, and that's kind of it. The war stuff wasn't as for independent filmmakers, like it's not a big. It's just the pieces. It's just putting all that together. It's the costumes and it's the guns. It's the vehicles. That's the hardest part about it. And then obviously putting your actor. Make sure your actors. There's so much stuff on YouTube now. World War II in color, World War II in HD. There's so much of that stuff that actors can sit down just on YouTube and watch 50 hours of stuff to even just get in that mindset. And that's the other thing I'd say. Make sure your actors sit down and they're talking the same way. That they know how to what lucky strikes are. They're talking about Boston, Boston and the Red Sox and the Yankees and who was on the teams then. Make sure they have banter. So if they want to ad lib some stuff, it's authentic. Yeah. And yeah, that's about it. That's about it. I mean, yeah.
Theme wise, what do you hope audiences would take away from this story? And I mean, audiences who may not have family members or relatives who've gone to war, can they relate to it?
I think they can. I think that anyone, especially in our current climate, can relate to ideologies that are threatening freedom in a lot of different aspects right now, and in many different countries, not just our own. And I think that's a big thing that this film points out. I've heard people say, "Oh, we're getting the same old Nazis were bad thing," but I don't think that right now is a time to push that on the back burner. I think right now, especially in this country, that's something that should be put right to the front. Is that hate speech and things like that should be quashed. And there was no better particular moment in time to kind of have that shine through with standing up to that than World War II, and how the world kind of came together to stop, especially a tyrant like Hitler. And right now, it's everyone in this country in particular needs to kind of figure out where their stances are, and at least just stand up to what is wrong, and that's speech and the hate speech and inciting those kinds of things. And I think that's the theme of the film. I think that it really shows through, like, regardless of what you're going to have to go through, the end result will always be, the thing that prevails and ends up being what is right. And sacrifice is a part of that. Sacrifice is clearly a part of that to protect freedom and to protect democracy, I guess, you could say as well. I think that's a running theme through the film. I think a lot of people just want to look at it and kind of say, like, here we go with another movie about bad Nazis, and it's and at the same time, even if that's what you want to say, then we probably should be looking at it that way every time, you know. Yeah. So yeah. But the main thing was friendship between people, and in dire circumstance, you don't have to be in a war. You could be in any kind of tragic circumstance that the person next to you that's going to be who's with you through that event, right? And you're gonna have to lean on one another. And so yeah.
All right. Final question. what are you working on next, and where can my fans follow you so they can be a fan of what are you working on next too?
Um, so I guess I'll talk about it. Can I talk about it?
Is it a
All right.
secret?
So yeah, so I think Kevin Makeley, who's my business partner and frequent collaborator, you've seen him in Big Legend and Any Bullet Will Do. We're gonna do another Western on a far larger scale than what we've done with any current movie. Much larger cast, shot through 5 states: Montana, Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. And it's a really great story about a detective who has to track down 3 very, very terrible men who were not convicted of war crimes after the Civil War. And the first African American senator tasks him with finding these guys. And it deals with a lot of moral code with justice and the law, and trying not to step over that particular line, as well as during that time frame just wanting to do a job and go buy a piece of land somewhere and kind of live out the rest of your life. I think there's a lot of things that clash when you want this and what will you do to get this. And it's going to be a really fun film to shoot in beautiful, beautiful locations. And so we're really excited about it. Yeah.
Social media, if you can share.
Social media, at Justin Lee Direct on Twitter and Instagram. And that's pretty much it. Same thing on Facebook, at Justin Lee Direct. It's all pretty universal. JustinLeeDirect.com. Yeah.
Justin, thank you for talking to me, and congratulations again on Alone We Fight. Thank you.